Hello guys, welcome to LawPutra's YouTube channel. Today we will discuss about the property, and by property we will discuss about what is the transferable property and what is non-transferable property. I am Jagannath Kulkarni and we will begin with the discussion of property today. To begin with about the property, let us say what our constitution says about it, the living document, which is the fundamental of all statutes in our country. So let us refer to Article 300A of Chapter 4, which talks about the right to property, of Part 12, which talks about the finance, property, contracts and suits of our Constitution of India 1950. It says persons not to be deprived of property save by authority of law. No person shall be deprived of his property except by authority of law. Now that takes us to the next discussion point, which says what is transferable property. Now we want to transfer the property. Now which can be the transferred? Now we have to refer to section 6 of Transfer of Property Act 1882. It says what may be transferred. So property of any kind, mark the word any kind, property of any kind may be transferred except as otherwise provided by this act, that is the Transfer of Property Act 1882, or any other law for the time being in force. And therefore the conclusion is any property is transferable property unless there is some legal restriction preventing its transfer. So this is the crux, this is the basis of what is transferable property. Now that leads to the next question as to what is non-transferable property. Now clause A to clause I covers total 10 clauses of section 6 of this Transfer of Property Act. It gives 10 exceptions. Why 10? Because additional clause DD is also there, so total 10 exceptions. They clearly indicating that what are the non-transferable property. And now let us discuss those 10 exceptions. The first says the chance of heir apparent succeeding to an estate, or the chance of a relation obtaining a legacy on the death of a kinsman who is owning the property, or any other mere possibility of like nature cannot be transferred. So this is the first and foremost exception. So official assignee, the proper case is Madras versus Sampath Naidu, All India Reporter, year 1933. 90 years ago case. Madras High Court, paragraph 795 says a mortgage executed by an heir is void even if he has suspicion about acquiring the property as heir. So transfer of space succession. Suspicion of succession is void ab initio. It will be void from the inception of it. Now second exception says a mere right of re-entry, which means right to resume possession of the land which has been given to someone else for a certain time for breach of a condition subsequent cannot be transferred to anyone except the owner of the property affected thereby. Now what is the third exception? It talks about the easement. By easement we means right of way, right of light, right of water cannot be transferred apart from the dominant heritage. This is again the exception between that. Fourth exception talks about all interest in property which is restricted in its enjoyment to the owner personally. This is important. Cannot be transferred by him. So the enjoyment which is personal enjoyment meant for personal enjoyment cannot be transferred. So a trustee cannot alienate his office because his office is based on personal confidence. So trustee cannot transfer. Fifth exception talks about right to future maintenance. The word is important. In whatsoever manner arising, secured or determined cannot be transferred. So because it is the personal benefit of the concerned person, although any particular arrears income thereof may be charged with it. It can be transferred in case of any arrears, but you cannot transfer the future maintenance. Sixth exception talks about right to sue. I've got the right to file a suit against anyone. It cannot be transferred. Why? Because this right is considered to be personal and exclusive to the aggrieved party. So a person cannot transfer his right to sue for the damages suffered by him due to breach of contract by the other party, because it is his personal right, exclusive right, cannot be transferred. Seventh exception talks about public office, which is the non-transferable property, cannot be transferred, nor can the salary of a public officer, because who holds that public office being eligible on grounds of his personal qualities, which cannot be transferred, whether before or after it has become payable, may be opposed to public policy in general. If the office is not public, it will be transferable even if it discharges of its duties is indirectly beneficial to the public. That can be transferred. Remember this basic difference. Eighth exception talks about stipends allowed to military, naval, air force and civil pensioners of the government. A pension by pension means any periodical allowance which may be granted in regard to any right of office, but only on account of the past services offered by the pensioner, not concerning any right of office but of special merit. And political pensions cannot be transferred. Stipends, pensions cannot be transferred. Why so? The case is Saundarya Bai versus Union of India, All India Reporter, year 2008, Madhya Pradesh High Court's case, paragraph 227, which says pension is not transferable property as long as it is unpaid and is in the hands of government. Pensions are separate from bonuses and rewards which are transferable. Pensions are not. Ninth exception says no transfer can be made insofar as it is opposed to the nature of the interest affected thereby. Now this covers res communis, which means things of which no one in particular is the owner, or res nullius, that is thing without an owner. For example, air, water of rivers, no owner is there. Or rex extra commercium means things which cannot be the subject of commerce, which are dedicated to idol, or for an unlawful object or consideration within the meaning of section 23 of Indian Contract Act 1872, even the prior act. It says what consideration and objects are lawful, what are not. So forbidden by law or of such nature if permitted would defeat the provisions of any law, if it is fraudulent, if it involves or implies injury to person or property of another, if court regards it as immoral or opposed to public policy. So house given on rent for purposes of gambling, prostitution, being immoral or opposed to public policy, cannot be transferred. Or to a person who is legally disqualified to be transferee, refer to section 136 of the same act, Transfer of Property Act, which says judge, legal practitioner, officer connected with any court of justice are debarred from purchasing any actionable claims. So this is. And the last exception, exception 10 says, nothing in this section 6 shall be deemed to authorize a tenant having an untransferable right of occupancy. The farmer in respect of which default has been made in paying revenue, or the lessee of an estate under the management of a court of wards to assign his interest as such. Tenant, farmer, lessee cannot transfer. So basic distinction is between transferable and non-transferable. Any and every property is transferable except as otherwise provided by this act, Transfer of Property Act 1882, or by any other law for the time being in force. What the non-transferable property? Space succession, right of re-entry, easement, restricted interest, right to future maintenance, mere right to sue, public office, pensions, nature of interests, statutory prohibition on transfer of interest, tenant, farmer, lessee. These are the non-transferable properties. Why this is so? Services which are the non-transferable interest, services tenure, religious office, right of preemption, emoluments which are attached to priestly office, because right to receive offerings at temple independent of obligation to perform services. So qualifications of personal nature, so transferable. Why so? Because remember, any property's transferability is general rule. Any property's non-transferability is the exception. Always remember this. And this comes from the maxim alienation re preferiter juri accrescendi, which means law favors alienation than to accumulation. So with this we come to the end of today's discussion. Thank you. Thank you very much. We today discussed transferable property and non-transferable property. Thank you.